Welcome to the Greater Irvine Chamber Business Insights podcast series, where we address challenges and ideas for early stage and entrepreneurial business leaders. Your host today is Dave Coffaro, Interim President and CEO of the Greater Irvine Chamber.
Well, welcome, folks, to the Greater Irvine Chamber Business Insight Podcast. Today, we're diving into ideas and strategies to help you accelerate your business growth in this new year. And whether you're a small retail company or a growing tech startup or a family-run business, this episode is packed with insights to help you scale your company. I'm joined by James Rosebush, an expert in business growth strategies who's helped numerous businesses across the globe reach new heights. Jim is founder of GrowthStrategy, a consulting firm that works with all different types of businesses across the globe, and a political aide who served as Deputy Assistant to President Reagan, Chief of Staff to First Lady Nancy Reagan, and Senior White House Advisor, making him the only White House office staff member ever to hold all three positions all at once. Jim is a public speaker on leadership, politics, philanthropy, and business. And most importantly for our podcast today, he's an expert in business growth strategies. So, Jim, thanks so much for joining us today.
Dave, thanks for inviting me. This is a tremendous honor for me to be on your show. You're doing such great work. And Orange County and Newport and all the communities that you serve, it's just always been one of my very favorite places. I've had opportunities to work in your area with numerous companies and family offices, and it always makes me happy to be there.
Well, we're thrilled to have you today. So, our members tell us that their top priorities are growing their businesses and growing their bottom line, probably no surprise to you, and also attracting and retaining talent. So, as 2025 begins to unfold, we know that the business landscape is evolving quickly. What foundational growth strategy should small to medium-sized businesses in the greater Irvine area prioritize to stay competitive this year, Jim?
Well, what a great question, Dave. But we have to be happy. There's no question about the fact that we're in a disruptive time in terms of our economy, in terms of politics. We don't really know where we're going to end up in terms of regulation and tax. So there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty, not to mention the stress placed on your beautiful state of California right now. My heart goes out to everyone that has been affected by that. It's been emotional for our family as well. My wife was born in Pasadena, and the LA area and Southern California is a second home for me. I spent so much time with the Reagans there, and the Pacific Palisades is where the Reagans' house was originally, no longer standing. But that's a very sad thing to see as well. I wanted to start off by sharing something that I just saw or learned about yesterday. It's a little sentence that was coined by Wayne Dyer, you may be aware of. He's a great speaker and coach. And this is what he said. And I really love this. And I think it's really good for starting off the year. He says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And to me, this has been always this kind of statement and this sort of truth has always been a part of the way I think and the way I work, largely because I had a father who was, and I think maybe this happens to some of us when we get older. We think how much I'm like my dad in certain ways. And I think it's mostly in professional ways because he had three notable things in his career. Number one, he worked for General Motors and as an executive, and he was known to be one of the top idea people in General Motors. So he was always coming up with new ideas, how to improve manufacturing, how to improve labor relations, how to improve cars. And I sat at his side, and sometimes he invited me as a kid into his factories. And I learned a lot from that. And I think perhaps as a kid, I didn't really perhaps value it as much as I do today. The second thing my dad did, he was a Dale Carnegie speaking coach. And that had a tremendous impact on me and on our family. And thirdly, he was a musician. So when I look at myself today, I think growing up, I don't know if we ever think when we're kids, oh, I'm going to be just like my dad or I'm going to be just like my mother. Uh, I didn't think that either. But now I see in my career, which has been absolutely extraordinary. I've had in just incredible opportunities to work with companies and family offices, and I'm so grateful for that. But I can see the footprints of my dad. Certainly, he expected me to be a musician, which I am. He didn't expect me to be a speaker coach, but I am a coach of individuals who and sales teams who want to do a better job communicating to their constituency. And third, and perhaps most important, he was a strategic thinker. He always as I said, a person of new ideas. So I love this quote from Wayne Dyer. And when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So we're in a period of, as I mentioned, extreme change in markets, change in customer behavior, the way we actually run our companies in terms of debt, in terms of raising capital, expanding. I would say that probably if you ask any business owner, you would have to come up with at least 80% of them would be saying, yes, I want to grow my business. Yes, I want to expand my business. Yes, I want to serve more customers. Yes, I want more sales. I don't think I've ever encountered anyone who owns or runs a business who has said to me, no, I don't want to grow. So there's a lot of people that are running companies today that are right on the edge, maybe some of them on the edge of either acquiring or expanding their new businesses or expanding their existing business, or perhaps even coming to a close in running their business or in selling them. So these are all things that are basically built into me. And I remember my dad, when I started so many people did this as teenagers, my lawn cutting business, when I was probably 8 years old, he said, the way you get new business is to know what your customers want. And I never lost that seed as a great, you might say, like I call them flashlights. It helps you get through the dark days, a flashlight does. And this flashlight for me was okay, okay, Dad, you're telling me that for me to be successful in business, even in my lawn cutting business, I had to understand the customer. What is the customer looking for? What is the customer willing to pay for what I do? And who is the customer? And the whole concept of who the customer is, or you could say the buyer, or anyone who is providing you with earned income and providing you with sales opportunities, it's really critical to know who your customer is, where they live, how they conduct themselves, what they're really looking for, what are they looking to achieve. I know I've had a couple of companies in Orange County that are small industrial companies, and in a couple of instances, they haven't absolutely known the customer well enough to know that, follow this, they may have been, and they were producing productively the materials that they thought they were smart enough to have engineered, but the customer was looking for something slightly different. And as a result, they didn't pick up on that opportunity. Today, I think especially, you have to be flexible, you have to listen, and you have to identify with your customer almost more than you identify with yourself. So I'll stop there for a minute. But that's just sort of and I'll be happy to talk more about how I've done this in the past for companies. But I just wanted to share that little opening with your audience.
There are three themes that I hear in what you said, and I can see the thread that you're pulling through them. So just to go back, starting with Wayne Dyer's comment, which I think is a fantastic thing to think about at the beginning of the year, and the first part of it, change the way we look at things. Also talked about we're in disruptive times and with a lot of change, but disruption. So if we take a different look at disruption as a potential opportunity. And then the third element, we combine that with what do we know about our customer? How are our customers changing? What's different about our customers in 2025 versus 24, 3, 2, 1, and so forth? If we sort of pull those things together, it sounds like that's sort of preparing us for how to navigate this new year. So, with that backdrop, which I think is a fantastic way to start the conversation, some of our members feel a lot of uncertainty about the economy right now. We hear it all the time. And so there's sort of this Wall Street having a great run, but a lot of Main Street businesses feel a little bit different. They sort of feel that the environment's different. What practical steps can business owners take to kind of fortify their businesses and do what you're talking about? Take a new view of things, capitalize on disruption, understand where your customers are going, and make this an extraordinary year.
Well, we all would like to think that we have a an ability to perceive or to see the future. But when it comes to finance in particular and keeping a business going and growing, I like that. It is almost impossible to do that because I find myself, I read a lot of financial news every day. And I try to imagine for my clients in particular which way things could go for them in terms of, let's say, the next year or the next 2 years, because we are so dependent on the power of money and the power of choice. So you see, and the same time, we're trying to figure it out for our own companies. We're listening to the stories of other companies that have either done extraordinarily better than we have, or they have found an investor to acquire them. A lot of I'm sure a lot of companies in Orange County are looking for buyers for their companies or investors that will allow them to expand. I have to say, and I won't name the one, but I know, Dave, you and I have talked about it. I had lunch recently at a small restaurant in Orange County, and I went over the moon about the quality of the food and the service. And I said to them, "How many of these restaurants do you have?" And they said, "Well, we're the only one." And I thought, and I actually said to this person, they were not my client. I was just eating lunch there, and I said, "You've got to be in every city in America. The quality of for your service and your food is so exceptional." Well, isn't that interesting? You're only as effective in terms of growing your company as your mind is able to grow. So you can't both, if you're the person in charge, if you own the company or you're the CEO or you're charged with this responsibility of growing the company, you have to take the responsibility again for, and I was curious with this extremely high quality small business that is just in one place, why they didn't want to expand. Well, maybe that's wise for them. Maybe they didn't have the capital. Maybe they didn't have the management team. But these are all part and parcel of your ability to do more. I'm writing my fourth book right now, which is called The Strange and Radical Disappearance of Leadership in the World. Let's talk about this. You're helping, Dave, so handsomely, the companies of all sizes in your jurisdiction at the chamber, and you see that even the smallest or even the largest companies still struggle with, am I producing the right, let's say you're an engineering company, and I've worked with several of them in the OC. So if you're an engineering company, if you're a manufacturing company, do we have the right products? How do we get more contracts from outside the U.S.? Are we going to be limited given our new political platform nationally? Where are we going to be in terms of tariffs? Where are we going to be in terms of our relationships with other production markets? A lot of people right now, for example, are migrating very rapidly to Vietnam, moving outside of China. So I think a good example would be a medical device company. that we grew 23% in 1 year, which was significant for them. There are a lot of mid to small size medical device companies all around the US, and I'm sure there's some in your part of the world as well. And these are companies that have been largely dependent on manufacturing, if not all, quite a bit of the medical device industry from China. And that's all been disrupted now, and probably for good reasons in certain ways. But I think companies are searching for how perhaps they can manufacture these in the US. The cost would be higher. You have to take that into consideration. But before I go any further, I want to say why I named my company after I left the White House and started this firm, Growth Strategy, because I determine or I define, by the way, I define uh, strategy as GPS. So if you know your destination, then strategy will get you there. You have to know your destination. And by destination, I mean, okay, this year I want to grow our firm 25%. Well, okay, that's a beginning. You have to know where you want to end up, and then you work backwards to get there. So let's apply GPS to your thinking about growing your business. You begin with an ideal goal or destination, as I would call it. Your destination is, I want to grow this firm by 30%. I want to grow this firm by 100%. Make it big, make it expansive, and make it generous. And then your strategy is going to tell you how to get there, but you cannot do it. You can't take a strategic plan without knowing exactly what your goal is. So that's why I say it's like GPS. You get in the car and you tell your digital device, I want to go to I want to go. I'm having a meeting with Dave, and I want to go to the chamber. You set that as your goal, and then GPS gets you there digitally. Now, it's that is just you might say a map to get to what we need to do, which is to actually create a strategic plan. Now, strategic planning is something that came into vogue, actually, with a very renowned economist who lived in your area, and a lot of people would come as a guru, and a lot of people would come and meet with him. But he really created this whole idea of strategy. Every company must have a strategy for growth, a strategy. It could be multiple strategy, a strategy for employee relations, a strategy for buying goods. So you can have a number of underlying strategies, but you must have the ultimate goal in mind. This is where I want to be. This is where I want to end up, and this is when I want to end there. So you have to set that goal, not in terms just very in terms of very specific. You could say this year I'm setting a goal of buying more petroleum products, or I'm set, and you set the specifics of where you're going to go with this, and then you work backwards. A strategic plan is really working backwards. You start from where you want to end, and then that will tell you exactly what you need to do each of the 12 months that will lead you ultimately back or completing or not your reach, which is this is where I'm going to be and why I'm going to be there. So this is something also that is tremendously helpful for your employees who are a critical part of deploying this strategy. What you want to do is you want to embrace them. So in the case of this medical device company, for example, I had all of the managers in creating this. I was presenting a strategic plan, but I had all of them in, because if you don't get your key employees bought into it, then they're not going to be, you need them to be on your team. So it's just like, when we're watching football, which was very interesting to watch in the last couple of days. So when you're on the field, you are critically dependent on each of those people, or otherwise it's not going to work. So each one of your players you have to see as an engine to deploying this strategy and buying into it. Because I've also worked with companies where, yes, we've created a strategy and we've deployed it, and you have some naysayers. You have some people, no, I think that was wrong. I don't think we should be in it. If you see that, that means you got a flat tire and you had to fix it. And you have to have everyone with you. And by the way, it isn't bad to have people who disagree. Not at all, because that strengthens your strategic plan. I have, because I am engaged as, and I don't call myself a consultant at all. Because I'm a friend of the company, I get very probably too engaged with my companies in the way that I really want them to succeed. And so it's not just sort of a, okay, here's a recipe or here's a menu and I'll see you later. No, that's not how I like to work. I like to get really into the heart of why do you have this company? Where do you see it going? Where do you see its strengths? Where do you see its weaknesses? And really devote myself to it. And sometimes I have to deal with the fact that people who are already in the company, maybe they've been there for years and years and years, maybe they're part owners of the company, they don't necessarily want someone from the outside coming in and doing this. But I'll tell you, it's critically important to bring in a person or a team or any advisor in this, because it will give you and the team. It's easier for you as the CEO to blame someone else who's come in to advise, because not it's it. I think it's pretty rare that you get an entire management team in agreement. That's okay. We need to hear what their fears are, what their concerns are, what their new ideas. But remember, going back to my dad, it was all about new ideas, asking yourself, do I know my customer? Do I know how I can satisfy the customer? Do I know how I can grow and reach that GPS strategic point where I can say to myself, we are taking off. Yes, it might be a challenging market. Yes, there might be a lot of disruption going on. That is not going to bother us, because we're going to conquer it, and we have a strategic plan to do it, and we've got we got the brains, and it could be engineering talent. We've got what it takes to expand from 3 restaurants to 25, or we've got, an engineering company, or we've got an automotive company, or whatever it is in whatever sector. It doesn't really matter. You're still dealing with the following factors. First, yourself. You have to recognize what perhaps your limits are and do something about it. Second, your financing. Third, your employees. Fourth, your people who either you're working through in purchasing, the people who are your customers. And those are all different elements that have to be taken into consideration. And to win, overall, the most important, new ideas.
So you're talking about so many different ingredients, and I think that GPS metaphor is a fantastic one when you think about it relative to your strategic plan. That's what success looks like, and then the journey between here and there is something that it's just how you get there. Um, Overlay that, if you will, to an environment that's disruptive, that's continually in flux. And so when we build strategic plans, often that feels like it's sort of this cast in stone thing. And then the world changes, and the world's continually changing. So, how does a business owner, a business leader, navigate that continually perpetual motion environment when they've got their strategic plan? They know what success looks like, but the road's going to change along the way.
I love this because it's just great to talk to you, Dave, because the fear of change. And again, I hate to refer to my dad again, but he gave speeches about what was called the RC factor. In this case, it had nothing to do with religion. It meant resistance to change. Now, fear has a lot to do with disruption, and it can be a result of disruption, or fear can actually create disruption. So you have to be 100% confident that what you're doing, what you're manufacturing, what you're selling, what you're building is going to win to the extent that you can possibly control it. And then you have to recognize it. Let's say if you're a home builder, you have to recognize that, and I'm sure most home builders do, they have to take into account that there could be a delay in getting concrete. There could be a delay in getting housing permits. There could be a delay in getting finance. There could be a delay in sales. All these things are part and parcel of owning a business and making a success. So you have to conquer all of those things, taking them into consideration and recognize them as opportunities to build higher step by step and to resolve those issues. Let's take the home building companies for as an example. And I love it, especially because real estate is kind of in my blood. So I see that people who really know, and there's so much. I was just reading that story in the Wall Street Journal this weekend about this community I never even knew existed in Arizona, not too far from Phoenix, but out basically in the desert. I don't know if you know about this community, and it's talking about how this thing sprung up and how it's built and all the and just it's something that I never knew about. But the developer had to understand not only land values, types of construction, all that sort of thing. But one of the big things they have to worry about, obviously, water, right? They're out in the desert. They're only permitted to build so many houses because the houses have to be able to, they have to be able to prove that they've got water and that the water is going to be there. I think it has to be there for like 25 years in order for them to get their permit to build, for people to build houses there. This is still one developer owns the whole thing. So there are a lot of complexities, but a lot of companies know how to deal with them. There are always going to be things thrown at you, but you have to have the confidence and you got to have the funding. Now that's another big thing that I work on with a lot of companies. A lot of companies are that's maybe sometimes the first thing they ask me if I would do. Well, would you raise capital for our company? Well, I'm not in the capital raising business, but I will raise capital if it's a part of your strategic growth. And some people will say, well, I'm not interested in your creating a strategic growth plan and managing it and developing it. I just want the money. Well, then I know for sure it's not a good match because they're not recognizing that hand in hand with whatever the investors are that they're going after, or they're talking to, or they want to have them as players in their company. They gain their confidence by knowing that the industry extremely well. And not only that you know it well, but you know where you're going in the future, and you know to the extent that you possibly can what your results are going to be. Now, this is like investing with I had a client who's based in Chicago, and he he had a little investment company, well, which became actually a problem for him because he was at that time, this is just maybe, I don't know, 2 years ago, he was investing in the five beauties, right? So Tesla, Apple, they called them the five beauties. Well, the only problem that he had was he was making so much money for his customers that they had huge tax problems, and he himself was invested, which I think should always be the case. And he was making so much money. He bought a plane that pulled into his driveway. He showed me all this stuff. It was very interesting. But so I watched this, but it came to an end because investing solely in those five beauties eventually became sort of haggard. And there were some things some downward tendencies there in terms of their valuation that didn't really hold with what his original strategy was. So there are always these things that happen, and you have to make sure that what you're doing is going to be sustainable and that your financing is going to be sustainable as well. So there are plenty of investors looking for places, believe me, places to put money. And you see this, for example, right now, working in the Middle East, I know that Saudi is not investing in U.S. businesses as much as they had, but that doesn't mean that other Middle East investors aren't. So, for example, I was just working with a Dubai family that's committed to invest $1.8 billion in the U.S. Okay, well, they have an idea of where they want to put it. Same thing is happening with another commitment from the Middle East, which is actually being managed in another country. And I think they announced $2.9 billion coming to the US. So there's still, despite both the growing, I think, opportunities for business in the US and also the unknowns, I guess you'd say, which are the things that are going to be thrown at us. Despite that, our country is still the most attractive place for investors. Now, the question is, have you got a business that you either, number one, want investors from other countries, especially the Middle East or from Europe, or that you're equipped to attract them as investors? And those are really right now. And I think especially because I know that there are a lot of interests in Orange County that are really trying to maybe bring back what it was at one time in terms of what I would call new ideas. And I think Orange County is a perfect place to do that. And I herald that. I think that having leadership there that really prizes and has the capacity to take new ideas and turn them into successful ventures, I think it's the perfect place for it. And so I'm a big fan of doing that. You have a high level of education in the population. You have obviously a very attractive real estate and living environment. And I'm just a big fan. I often stay when I come in Laguna Niguel, which I think I shared with you, Dave. And I was fascinated by the fact that, and probably many of your listeners have observed this as well, or maybe they do it. So where I stay, I look down on, it's a big surfer beach. But I was fascinated by the fact that these guys, and I think they're mostly men, are out there from really early morning to nighttime. And it's not necessarily what I would call a surfer beach. There isn't that much surf, but they're just bobbing. They're just there. I think you could say they'd like to catch a wave, but I think this is a sort of a example of how we think about strategy in business. Okay, now follow this. So there, you look out, beautiful ocean. I just love being there and looking out. You feel like I can look all the way to Japan, and I see all these surfers. Well, one time, I had a conversation with one of them coming out of the water. I guess I was walking on the beach or I was swimming or something, and I said, "What are you guys? Who are you?" I thought, are they homeless people? Well, I don't think so, because they all come, they put their wetsuits on and everything, but they're not necessarily catching waves. And I said, who are you? And they, who are all of these people? Like, are you independently wealthy? Are you homeless? Or, I had to ask them. And so they said, well, why don't you come we're having a benefit. It's called the Surfers Ball. Why don't you come? He invited me to go to the Surfers Ball. And I'm not a surfer. And I thought, well, that would be intriguing. So I went to it. And what I found out is that these are all business owners, and they're somewhat wealthy. But what they're doing, basically what they're doing out there is they're thinking up new ideas. So they're just bobbing, right? So take that image in your mind, okay? They're out there, and a lot of us, maybe we're runners and we get our best ideas when we're running. I'm a biker. I get my best ideas when I'm biking. I'm trying to share with your audience what I think is the most important thing, and that is ideas. Ideas are the most important thing that you could own you could develop, you could share, and you can make money from. I love this idea. So the surfers, they're not catching that many waves, but they're getting ideas while they're out there bobbing. And I just like this graphic picture of these guys. Oh my gosh, what what a life, right? But they just go out there, they're just bobbing, but they're not just hanging there, they're getting ideas. And so that's where I learned at the surfer ball.
What a great story and a great example of how to sort of access new ideas to grow your business. So let me do my best to recap all you've covered, and you covered a lot of ground. You can tell me if this is the message we want to send. So first and foremost, know your customer, who they are, what matters to them, what they value, what they'll pay for, and how that's changing. The second thing that I heard is disruption is the norm. That's just sort of the way of business. And part of the way that we address that disruption in context of knowing our customers is by actively engaging in new ideas that are going to help us find new, better, faster, cheaper, more effective ways to serve our customers. The next thing that I heard is that as business owners, as leaders, we need to manage the RC factor, the resistance to change, understanding that part of our job is to be a change leader, both navigating the expected as well as the unexpected things. And 2025 will be no different than any other year. There will be those expected as well as the unexpected changes. And then that the clearer the strategy, the better we have the ability to access the capital we need to grow if that's what we want to do. So how did I do in summarizing all that you've covered, Jim?
Big, you did a better job than I did.
I, I took the best notes, and this was rich with lots of ideas. We are at the end of the time, but you have left our audience with just a bunch of terrific, actionable ideas. Hopefully my recap just strengthens what you brought to the party. Thank you so much for being a part of our podcast today.
Oh, you're so welcome. I've loved every minute of it.
All right. Have a great rest of the day, folks. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for joining us for the Greater Irvine Chamber Business Insights podcast. To stay informed about upcoming podcasts and other important business news, please subscribe to our channel or check the Greater Irvine Chamber website.